Should be on the
third
CSB.
safety issue identified by the CSB was the ventilation inside.
What's going on, y'all? AttorneyTom here, back at it again with another react to the USCSB's channel. For anybody who doesn't know, the USCSB is the United States Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board, or CSB for short. It's kind of like OSHA, but unlike OSHA, they have a fantastic YouTube channel, which leaves in-depth, detailed, and well-animated videos about some of the investigations they conduct. And as many of y'all know, I'm a catastrophic personal injury lawyer. And unfortunately, part of the job is dealing with cases that involve refinery explosions, chemical spills, things that the CSB investigates. So I thought we would watch this together. I'll pause it, give my input, and we'll see if we can learn something. I actually found the last video that we did very interesting from my perspective as well. This is a great exercise, and it really shows you what can go wrong in these type of situations. And last thing before we start, we are going to talk about this as simply as possible. No legal mumbo jumbo. We don't need that. Also, I want to take a step back and appreciate that when these videos are made, the investigation is complete. As a lawyer, when you are hired on to work a refinery explosion or a chemical spill or whatever, these facts aren't clearly laid out. So we are literally on the ground floor while the facts unfold. And oftentimes we rely on experts and investigators from in places like the CSB or OSHA to have the facts play out in front of us. Enough talking, let's jump into it. The title of the video is Silent Killer Hydrogen Sulfide Releases in Odessa, Texas. So for anybody who doesn't know, hydrogen sulfide is a chemical, it's a gas that is released when you drill oil. So once oil comes up from the ground, hydrogen sulfide comes out with it. And then once the oil is drilled from the ground, they then have to purify the oil and separate it from the hydrogen sulfide. And if you can tell by the title, it's dangerous.
October 26, 2019. The Aghorn Operating Incorporated water flood station near Odessa, Texas. One Aghorn employee succumbed to toxic hydrogen sulfide gas that had escaped through a damaged pump. His spouse was also fatally injured by the hydrogen sulfide gas while searching for him at the facility after he didn't return home.
Okay, right off the bat, from the legal perspective, as I noted in the last video, workers' comp is essentially a scam. It just is. The very first thing a lawyer does when an incident like this happens is determine whether or not the individual who is injured is comp barred. Meaning if workers' comp is going to apply, well, there's really not a whole lot a personal injury lawyer can do. So right off the bat, I don't know the employment status of the worker who was killed, whether he was an employee or a contractor, but his wife was killed who went to the scene. She is a third party. She had no relationship with any company involved, so she would not be comp barred for sure. Also, just right off the bat, how was the wife even allowed to get into a potentially hazardous area? You know what? I will bet you a like that they bring that up.
The Aghorn water flood station is used as part of a process to extract oil from underground reservoirs in West Texas. Oil extraction starts at an oil well, where pump jacks are used to lift oil from underground reservoirs. Reservoirs in West Texas also contain hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas which comes to the surface with the oil that is extracted. The oil comes out of the ground with some water in it. To remove the water, the mixture is fed to a tank battery. As the oil and water mixture sits in the tanks, the water separates from the oil. The oil is then transported for further processing. The water is pumped through pipelines to the water flood station. It is now called produced water because it can contain residual oil and other contaminants, such as toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. At the water flood station, The produced water flows into a large storage tank called a suction tank. The water then enters a building called the pump house. There, pumps are used to pressurize the produced water and inject it back into the oil field through injection wells. The injected water increases reservoir pressure and displaces the oil, allowing a larger quantity of oil to be extracted. At the time of the incident, there were 2 pumps in the pump house. The pump house also contains a control room from which employees run the station. Typically, the station is not continuously occupied. Instead, an Aghorn employee, called a pumper, visits twice per day to record meter readings and inspect equipment. If there is an equipment problem and a pumper is not at the station, an alarm system triggers an automated phone call to the pumper. It is then the pumper's responsibility to acknowledge the alarm and go to the station to determine what is causing it. The station was also equipped with a hydrogen sulfide detection and alarm system that would trigger a separate automated phone call to the pumper on duty if it detected dangerous levels of the toxic gas. The system would also illuminate a rotating red beacon light on top of the pump house. But the CSB found that this critical detection and alert system was not functional on the night of.
So as always, we're just going to issue spot everything and then we'll talk about it at the end. So issue 1 is the alert system is not working. So as the pumper drove up to the facility, he should have been alerted that there were dangerous amounts of hydrogen sulfide.
Of the incident. At 6:38 p.m. on October 26th, the water flood station's control system activated an oil level alarm on a pump. 5 minutes later, the phone system called an Aghorn pumper, alerting him of a pump malfunction of some kind. The pumper drove to the water flood station. The hydrogen sulfide beacon light was not illuminated when the pumper arrived at the water flood station or at any time for the rest of the night. The pumper parked near the water flood station, leaving his personal hydrogen sulfide monitor inside his truck.
So issue number 2, the pumper did not bring in his hydrogen sulfide monitor. Now, I am almost positive the company would allege that the pumper is the one who made the mistake by not carrying in this monitor. But the red light did not flash, giving him no predisposition to carry in the monitor, although I'm sure that the company has a procedure where they say he needs to bring this in to all the pump houses at all times. Now, this is a concept that I want to get through people's head. In the real world, it's not black and white. There's a spectrum of fault, okay? And that's basically the lawyer's job, is to argue who is more at fault. And the way a jury is going to see this in a wrongful death action or whatever action is brought for negligence is they are going to assign percentages. So they're going to look at the totality of the evidence and then assign a percentage of who is at fault. You know what? I'm going to ask y'all to assign percentages after we watch the rest of this, and we'll see if we can learn something. Let's keep going.
The pumper went into the control room, where the control system indicated the alarm was for pump number 1. The pumper prepared for work on pump number 1. The pump, which could automatically start when enough water was available to pump to the injection wells, was still connected to its power source. The pumper did not de-energize the pump. The pumper then walked to the pumps. He closed pump number 1's discharge valve and partially closed the pump's intake valve. While the pumper was near the pump, he was overcome and fatally injured by toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. After the incident, the CSB found that a plunger on the pump had shattered, which had allowed water containing hydrogen sulfide to escape from the pump into the pump house, where the...
So issue 3, the plunger on one of the pumps was broken, hence the exposure to hydrogen sulfide.
The pumper was working. Due to limitations of available evidence, the CSB was unable to determine whether the pump failure and water release occurred before the pumper arrived at the facility or if the pump automatically turned on while the pumper was closing valves. Okay,
so that is a potential issue right there. The pump automatically turning on when the pumper is closing the valve. Now, we don't know what happened for sure, but potential issue, I should say.
Several hours, when the pumper did not return home, his spouse drove with their 2 children to the station to check on him. She entered the water flood station facility and searched for him. She soon found him on the floor in the pump house. She then was also overcome and fatally injured by the toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. A short time later, emergency responders approached the pump house.
That's terrible. With the children. We are lucky the children didn't go in looking for their mother.
They detected a very strong smell of hydrogen sulfide. This required them to set up the command post outside the front gate of the facility and wear self-contained breathing apparatus. They found the pumper and his wife deceased inside the pump house and water spilling from pump number 1. The responders rescued the 2 children who were inside the spouse's car. Working with Aghorn employees, they were able to stop the water release the following morning.
I still can't get over that the wife just walked into the facility. That would be a huge issue for me if I was representing the wife.
Safety issues identified was that the pumper was not equipped with his company-issued personal hydrogen sulfide detection device inside the pump house on the night of the incident. When the pumper's personal hydrogen sulfide detector was located in his work truck, it was found to be in an alarm state, meaning it had detected dangerous levels of hydrogen sulfide.
Wow.
The potential for a hydrogen sulfide release was a known hazard at the water flood station, as indicated by the posted signage and a safety pamphlet provided to all employees. However, there was no evidence that Aghorn management required use of personal hydrogen sulfide detectors or adequately trained employees that equipment malfunctions could indicate a toxic hydrogen sulfide release.
Okay, so we just got a ton of information there. And again, this points to the spectrum, right? The assignment of fault. So yes, the pumper should have brought in his hydrogen sulfide personal monitor. And he had a hydrogen sulfide personal monitor, which means at least he had some knowledge of the potential dangers. Additionally, the company should have some form of procedure that mandates pumpers bring in said hydrogen sulfide monitor every single time they go into a pump house. On top of that, they should have some formal training because it is very dangerous. So I would argue that posting a sign or giving somebody a brochure or pamphlet is literally the bare minimum. If you're going to be working with a hazardous material or hazardous chemical, then you need formal training.
The second safety issue CSB investigators discovered is that at the time of the incident, Aghorn did not have any written lockout-tagout policies or procedures, but relied on verbal procedures without formalized training. On the night of the incident, the pumper did not properly perform lockout-tagout to de-energize the pump before performing work on it. Instead, he started to close the pump's valves while the pump was still configured to be automatically operated by the control system. As a result, the control system automatically turned the pump on, and water containing hydrogen sulfide was able to escape from the pump.
So the pumper did not have any formal training on how to de-energize the pump. You'd think that is important. And these procedures need to be written down and codified, not just verbal. So what they're saying is that this company's procedures entailed just verbal communications. Like, oh, make sure you do this, make sure you do that, make sure you do this. Let me tell y'all something. It is foreseeable that people forget. You need constant training and you need codified practices written down.
Discharge valve was closed.
Should be on the
third
CSB.
Safety issue identified by the CSB was that ventilation inside the pump house was inadequate, leading to fatal concentrations of hydrogen sulfide gas within the building. The CSB found that the pump house could be ventilated by 2 bay doors, exhaust fans, and natural vents on each of the 4 outside walls. Due to the limitations of available evidence, The CSB was unable to confirm whether the exhaust fans were operational at the time of the incident. The two bay doors were approximately 60% open, but this was not enough to adequately ventilate the building.
Long story short, it is foreseeable if you have a pump house that you're going to need ventilation. And sometimes natural ventilation isn't enough. So you need affirmative things that are going to ventilate the building, such as fans, to get that toxic, dangerous out of there.
And the CSB's investigation could not find any evidence that Aghorn assessed the pump house to ensure it could be properly ventilated, despite the potential for a hydrogen sulfide release to occur inside. The fourth safety issue noted by the CSB was the lack of a robust safety management program at Aghorn. Comprehensive safety management practices include risk identification, assessment, mitigation, and monitoring of design, procedures, maintenance, and training. Safety management practices are an essential element of protecting workers and non-employees from toxic gases at chemical plants.
I mean, if this company didn't even have formal procedures on how to operate the equipment, it's not shocking that they didn't have formal procedures for safety, which is immensely more important. Let's just keep going.
At Aghorn, there were no operational, training, testing, and maintenance procedures or records, other than items such as a cell phone use policy and a pamphlet on the hazards of hydrogen sulfide.
Nothing.
These items were not sufficient to prepare employees for potential encounters with hazards inherent to their work.
At facilities that handle toxic gases, companies must develop and implement a robust safety management program to protect workers and non-employees from exposure to toxic gas.
Yeah.
The CSB identified a fifth safety issue at Aghorn, which was a non-functioning hydrogen sulfide detection and alarm system.
Probably pretty important.
Some of the facility's detectors were set to a testing mode, which prevented them from sending an alarm signal. And other sensors that were correctly set up were unable to send a signal to the control room. As a result, the pumper was not warned of the toxic hydrogen sulfide, either through a telephone alert or illumination of the red pump house beacon light. And finally, the sixth safety issue, discovered by the CSB at Aghorn, was deficient site security.
Yes.
Per Aghorn's informal policy, when an Aghorn employee is working at the facility, the access gates are normally left unlocked. On the night of the incident, this practice allowed the pumper's spouse to drive directly to the water flood station and enter the pump house, where she was also fatally injured.
Y'all owe me a like. I wish I could be happy about it. This just kind of puts me in a bad mood. All right, that's it for the CSB's video. But before we go, I need your help. You're going to act as the jury. I need y'all in the comments to assign a percentage of fault. Two separate claims. Pumper versus company and wife versus company. They're each going to have a separate claim with a different assignment of fault. So you're going to weigh the totality of everything that you saw. So the lack of training, the lack of the pumper bringing in the device, the lack of safety equipment that was working, the lack of notification, the lack of training, the lack of procedures. How much at fault was the company for the pumper's death versus how much at fault was the pumper for his own death? And do the same analysis for the wife. I'm going to pause it and then I'm going to give my percentages. Okay, personally, I think the company was 85% at fault for the pumper's death, meaning the pumper was 15% at fault. Yes, he should have brought in his hydrogen sulfide monitor, and he had one on him, so presumably he did know there was a risk, but he clearly wasn't trained in the procedure to operate the pump, which may have very well released the hydrogen sulfide. He wasn't trained in hydrogen sulfide to begin with. He wasn't made aware of the hydrogen sulfide by the light not blinking or him not receiving a warning before he got onto the property. Yes, he could have done better and checked it out for himself, but I still think the company is 85% at fault, and that's being generous. Now, with respect to the wife, I think the company is 100% at fault. The wife could not have been expected to know about the hydrogen sulfide. She was simply just looking for her husband, and in finding him, she died. If you are dealing with a hazardous material, it should not be that accessible to the public. So 100% of fault, in my opinion, on the company for the wife's death. All right, y'all, I hope you found this fascinating. I think it's fascinating, although infuriating, but thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit that like button. Consider subscribing to this community. We cover a wide variety of videos. We do really fun videos and we do really serious videos like this. And we just have a good time and try to learn something along the way. All right, y'all. Thank you again for your support. Talk to you soon. Bye.